Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July webinar in my Childless Chats Over Cocktails series. I am so excited about our guest today because, as many of you know, I'm a huge fan of Jody's and kind of blowing my mind that she agreed to do this with me. So I'm really excited. I know a lot of you are probably already familiar with her and her work, but I'm hoping that if you're not, you'll learn a little bit more about her because she's fabulous. So a little bit about myself, because I think a lot of you maybe know Jody better than you know me, but my name's Katie, and I started a website called Chasing Creation about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And it was after a hysterectomy that I had for endometriosis and fibroids, and I had previously spent 4 years trying to conceive. And that was kind of the end of my journey to parenthood. And so I really created Chasing Creation to try to provide some support for me and create community and get healing through sharing my story and talking about what I was experiencing, and then getting to connect with other women who are going through the same thing. And it's grown a lot since then, so I've added a few things. One is these webinars that I do monthly, so every month I have different guests on and we talk about topics related to childlessness. And then I also started a few months ago a childless support group that's virtual. And so if you want more information about that, you can find it on my website. But that's been a really fun, healing way for me to get to connect with more women in our community as well. So that's a little bit about me. A few notes about just housekeeping before we get started. So the chat box is working, but I have it turned on so that only Jody and I can see your comments. We had over 600 people RSVP, which just blew my mind. And I didn't think I could moderate all the comments. So we can still see them. So please, if you have something you want to say to us, you can go ahead and add it in the chat box. If you have a question for Jody, because we will have time for Q&A at the end, please add that in the actual Q&A little tab. You'll find a button for it at the bottom of your screen. Use that so that I'm not trying to look through all the chat comments. So it is 10 a.m. here, so I am not drinking a cocktail. I just brought coffee. So it's a little early for anything else. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So Jody, I'm thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining me today. And I just love that we have the technology to be able to do this, where you're, thousands and thousands of miles from me, but yet here we are getting to have this conversation and have the ability to have women from all over the world join us as well. So very cool. But I would love to have you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you started, a little bit about Gateway Women for any viewers that aren't familiar with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your webinar. And I've been following your work, and you and I have been in close connection probably for about a year as well, and I love what you're doing, and so it's a great privilege to support your work and hopefully bring some new people to awareness of your work. So my name is Jody. I'm the founder of Gateway Women. Gateway Women is almost a decade old. It'll be a decade old next spring. It started as a blog, very much in the same spirit as Chasing Creation, in that I felt like the only childless woman in the world. I was certainly the only childless woman in my circle of friends, in my family, amongst my colleagues, amongst my peers. In fact, I didn't know a single other childless woman. I knew 2 child-free by choice women, and that was it. So when I first wrote that very first blog and kind of press publish, and women from all over the world started writing back to me in the comment box, basically saying, how do you know the exact words that are in my head? How are you having those thoughts? And I remember just sitting there, at my computer, just tears just running down my face of just like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And that was the beginning. And so, Gateway Women has always been right from the beginning about connection, about bringing us together. I had no idea that it would turn into what it turned into. It was just me and the laptop pouring out my heart. I didn't realize that I was breaking such a huge taboo. I mean, I was one of the first childless bloggers who was completely open. I used my real name. I used my real photograph. I didn't I didn't sort of hide behind anything because I didn't feel the need to. And that was new. And I think also I just went at it with the same kind of, I came from a background in design and stuff like that. And I just made it like me. I didn't really, people say, oh, who did your branding or who did this? And it's like, I just did what I thought looked quite nice. And it turned out that very modern, kind of fresh, slightly funky approach really resonated with a lot of women, because I think a lot of sort of infertility and stuff and sort of self-helpy stuff out there, a lot of women didn't feel comfortable identifying with it. So it was just luck and timing. And it turned out that being British and being based in London at the time, and someone who had a background in writing and journalism and things like that, I was the right messenger in the right place at the right time, because London, although London, do you know what I mean, we're just this little island off the coast of Iceland, but it has an enormous global reach because of the English language and because of the way that, that British culture goes around the world. So I made quite a big noise in quite a small space, and that helped to amplify across the world. So within a very short period of time, Gateway Women became quite influential, and then I started the meetups, I started the online groups, I started teaching my first courses. I was training to be a psychotherapist, and I took a lot of my inspiration for how I created Gateway Women from the healing also that I got from being part of 12-step groups. My marriage had broken down because of my ex-husband's addiction issues, and so I'd been part of Al-Anon, and that showed me the power of peer-to-peer healing. And that actually enabled me to create Gateway Women without thinking, actually, I need to have the answers, I need to be an expert, because I wasn't. I was stumbling along in the dark like everyone else. And that, I think, has been one of the things that people really relate to with Gateway Women. We're all just together trying to work it out. We're all on the same path, but we're all on very different journeys. And so then that led to my book. This is its new edition with its little silver lining cover there, Living the Life Unexpected. And yeah, I mean, here we are, nearly a decade later, and apparently I'm the grand old dame of childlessness. I'm the, I don't know, all kinds of things now. So so that's just a potted history of Gateway Women, and it keeps evolving, as do we in our childlessness.
Well, I certainly relate to a lot of what you said about, just putting a piece of yourself out there and getting those voices back of people saying, I really took so much to this, I really needed to hear this. And that sense of connection that you feel with a stranger really is just incredible. And the other thing is the vulnerability that you had in being willing to attach your name to it, because I think that's something still where with the internet now, I know that if I have my full name on anything that I'm doing related to chasing creation, if I go for a job or I meet somebody new, or I'm just leasing an apartment, I know the first thing that comes up when someone Googles me is going to be related to this. And there is a little bit of nervousness, like, how am I going to be judged by this? Or like, what are people going to think? And at the end of the day, I've just decided I'm not doing anything terrible. I just don't have kids. So, why is that such a scary thing to say to people? So I definitely relate to what you said there. But will you let us know if people are interested in kind of getting to know more about your work or the services that you provide, what type of programs or events, or I know obviously your book, but let us know a little bit about how people can plug into the resources that you provide.
Certainly. Well, you can go to the Gateway Women website, which is gateway-women.com. And there you'll find access to our online community, which is now on Mighty Networks and is incredibly rich. We've got webinars and courses and all kinds of things happening. Our Reignite weekends, which is the kind of the 2-day healing workshop that I created back in 2012, and it's been running ever since. That's been on a hiatus recently because of coronavirus. We haven't been able to meet live, but we're actually creating an online version of it, which will be debuting in October. So make sure that you're on the Gateway Women mailing list if you want to kind of know more about that. And we have a 12-month online program as well called the Online Bee, which is currently in session, but that will be running again in 2021. It'll start in spring 2021. There's so much going on in Gateway Women, less in person than usual, but there's still a great deal, and you can find access to it on the website.
Great, thank you. All right, so before we get started with my first question for you, I actually have a poll for those at home. So this is just a fun one for me to see where you guys are at. So on your screen, you should see this come up. Are you in the US, the UK, or somewhere else? And if you're somewhere else, let me know in the chat box where you're at. And usually I don't have quite as many from the UK, but since I know you're a big draw for this one, so. All right, we've got someone from Canada, a couple people from Canada. Yeah. Oh, a lot from Canada. Okay, we got Switzerland, Finland, Montreal, Germany, Ireland. Oh my gosh, this is going so fast, I can't read them all. Sweden, Belgium. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, we literally have people from like all over the world here. Wow. Okay, very cool. Well, welcome everyone.
It's lovely to see lots of people joining from Ireland as well, because Ireland is my new adopted home. Although for those people looking at me at that, what's over my shoulder is not Ireland. I'm currently in Spain. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to everyone from wherever it is that you're joining us. Okay, so my first question for you, I'm going to just preface with a little bit of background about my journey with this idea of how we find meaning once we are, have accepted a childless life and are trying to move forward with that. So I grew up Mormon, which if people on the call don't know, this is a very conservative religion, and part of the belief system around it really focuses on women's purpose is to be mothers. And there's not really a purpose outside of you for that. That just is what you were put on the earth to do. And it goes so far even to say that once you die and you're in heaven, if you were, say, infertile in this life or couldn't have kids, then that was a test that God was putting you through, and your reward is that you get to have babies in heaven and be a mom once you're in heaven. So even in the afterlife, it's entirely focused around motherhood, and there just really isn't any conversation outside of that. So even though I wasn't Mormon when I had left, the faith by the time that I was infertile, and going through infertility, but I just found that those beliefs had stuck so hard in my core that it kept coming up in therapy. And even though, in that 10 years since I had not been Mormon, I had become a feminist and an atheist and had all these other worldviews that I felt like were very female empowered. And I never would have looked at another woman and said, your life is meaningless because you don't have kids. But for me, it was so hard to see my worth and to see what another plan could look like. Mm-hmm. And so I just realized that the more that I have talked to women over these last few years, that theme comes up so much of feelings of, is my life worthy? Can it be meaningful? And I saw when I was prepping for this, I went back to your book on my Kindle and typed in meaning because I was looking for quotes and refreshing what you had said about it. And I think there was like 125 instances of you using the word meaning. So you're the perfect person to discuss this because I know your book focuses on it so much. You do have a chapter called Motherhood with a capital M. And it really debunks the myth that motherhood is the only path to purpose and meaning, and that the things that we commonly associate with joy, meaning, connection are only accessible through motherhood. And so I wanted to ask you, how pervasive do you feel that this myth is that motherhood equals meaning in our society?
I'd say that it's one of the foundational myths of our society. It has its roots in an ideology which is called pronatalism, and and people are like, well, what is that? And what is an ideology? Well, an ideology is a belief system, a human belief system that we are conditioned to believe is actually a truth, that it's actually an idea, but we're taught it's a truth. And And people say, well, I'm not into that kind of thing. You know, that's all a bit sort of highfalutin for me. It's like, well, you can't sort of not be into ideology. It's like asking a fish, are you, are you into water or not? It's like, so ideology is the medium in which human culture exists. And pronatalism is part of patriarchy. And pronatalism is the belief system that says that the only meaningful and fully adult way to be a real adult is to be a parent. And the only truly meaningful life for a woman is to be a mother. And therefore that parents and mothers are intrinsically of more value as human beings than non-mothers. Now, very few people will go around and actually articulate this. But if you imagine, if it's a foundational belief that underpins everything, it's kind of there in the background. It filters every discussion and every belief and every decision that we make about our lives, judgments that we make about ourselves, judgments that other people make about us. So it is absolutely everywhere. I think when I started to understand that there was a systemic way of looking at this kind of motherhood mania, and I began to understand and I began to unpack it, I had an incredible sense of relief, because I thought, well, if this is a belief system rather than a reality, it's not gravity. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to believe in gravity for gravity to work. That means there might be alternative belief systems. That means I might be able to actually unpick this. And that chapter that you talk about is one of the chapters where I really start to unpick pronatalism and go, is this true for me? Do I agree? And what does believing this do for me? Does this help me with my life as a childless woman to really believe that I'm inferior to women who are mothers? Also, that I'm inferior to the woman I would have been had I been a mother. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot. I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think we talked about this as a subject in the last support group that I did, with this idea of finding meaning. And, I asked, who told you that meaning comes from motherhood? And it was so interesting to hear the responses, because a lot of times we're hearing that message from multiple angles. So, I mean, I definitely got it from my religion growing up, but then just society in general, family, friends, it's just so pervasive. I feel like you watch TV and movies and books, and a lot of the storylines, that happy ending includes motherhood, and it really is so pervasive.
I think we're also living through a period of very amplified pronatalism, in that I think I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember that, so I was born in the 60s, so my kind of growing up years were the 70s. And in the 70s, pregnancy and motherhood was not glamorous and it was not interesting. It was just something that women did. And they wore huge maternity smocks. It was a little bit embarrassing. It was something private that was visible in public. There was nothing noteworthy or glamorous about it, and, you got there was no sort of big consumerism around it. You got hand-me-down prans and strollers from friends. You got hand-me-down sort of clothes from other people. So, and what started to happen in the 80s, and it really began, I think there was an amazing moment for it, which some viewers may remember, which was when Demi Moore appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair with a very heavily pregnant, sort of with body paint all over her, looking like she was wearing clothes. And it was an extraordinary moment, because that was the moment when really pregnancy became a public achievement for a woman. And the period we've been living through is when pronatalism meets consumerism, which I think is why it's absolutely everywhere now. I mean, a Z-list celebrity, all she's got to do to get on the cover of one of these terrible magazines is just to get knocked up. Like it's a huge achievement. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't an achievement, especially for many of us who, really, really wanted to be pregnant, but it shouldn't be the most noteworthy female achievement. That kind of blows everything else that it takes to be a woman out of the water. And I fundamentally disagree with it. And it's there to sell things.
Absolutely. And you still see that being asked. I know there are celebrities that speak out against it, but that they get annoyed that the first questions that they're asked in interviews is often, how do you balance family and work, and do you have kids? You know, tell like the kids thing is such a big deal, and especially I think for women who like celebrities who are older and going through infertility. You see all these covers on magazines, so and so pregnant at 45, and you know it really is just so pervasive. So I think one thing that I love.
I think there
Oh,
will be a backlash against that, you know, because I think there'll also be a backlash because all sort of processes of kind of social change that we go through tend to go in quite big pendulums.
mhm.
And so there tends to be sort of something, then there's a big reaction against it, then a big reaction against that, then it balances at a new normal, and then it kind of kicks off again. Because I also do wonder how the children are, who have been so heavily featured on social media by their parents, as they grow up, how they're going to feel, and they may take very different decisions if or when they have children, and family life may become something more private again, and I think it needs to.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting because you think about the facial recognition where you can see photos, and so there are kids now growing up who have public lives on the internet without any knowledge of it, you know,
And without
just
their consent.
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, well, one of the things I absolutely love about you, and I also interviewed Leslie Pine. I had her as a previous guest, and what I love is that I find myself, I'm 2.5 years post hysterectomy, and sometimes I feel like, oh, do I really want to keep doing chasing creation? It takes so much time, and the more that I heal, the less I need it personally. I feel like because I'm not grieving as much. The grief is still there, but it's so much less. And so I love that people like you and Leslie and others have really made the commitment to providing support and showing us more long term what a life without kids that's meaningful and fulfilling can look like. Because I think in my own personal life, I only know one person who is childless not by choice. That I know of. Maybe others are and they haven't talked about it, so I assumed that they were child free by choice. But it was so just comforting to me when I found you to listen to your TED Talks and see all the content you put out, and to read your book and realize like, oh, I'm not the only one who's gone through this. But your ability to really stick with it over, decades, to where it's a different perspective than someone may have in their 20s or 30s or even 40s when it first hits them and they're really deep in that grief, that you have a more long-term perspective on it. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate, give you some thanks for that.
Thank you.
But knowing that there are probably quite a few on the call who are just coming to accept a life without children, I think that's a lot of my audience that I have, people I connect with on Instagram or through my blog. A lot of them tend to be similar to my age, so 30s, and this is a very new thing for them. Although I'm sure there are a lot on the call who are, decades into this, and so I think we have a mix. But anyway, and for those who just are coming to accept a life without children and are having a hard time believing that a meaningful life is possible, what would you tell them?
First of all, I'd say welcome. Welcome to your tribe. You're not alone. I think the experience of realizing, for whatever reason, infertility or circumstance, that your dream of motherhood is not going to be a reality is an absolutely heartbreaking loss. It's a loss that we, as society, doesn't recognize, and I think it takes us time to really even give ourselves the recognition of how life-altering and how devastating this loss is. So first of all, I would say, welcome, take your time. There is no one route through this. Every childless woman's story about how she arrives in the room called childlessness is different. Every route out into a meaningful life is different. I think there can be a desire, understandable, to sort of rush for answers. to maybe look to role models like me or like Katie and think, well, if I could do it like this, or I could do it like that. And I would say, take a deep breath, really recognize that this is your journey to do your way in your timing as well. There's no rush. It's a shocker, but we're going to be childless for the rest of our lives. We don't have to sort it all out this year. Yeah. So acknowledge that your heart is broken. Seek support for your grieving, and you'll need to find that support amongst your childless peers, your conscious childless peers, because not every childless woman wants to have these conversations for a whole load of complicated reasons. You need to be with women like us who are prepared to sort of talk like this, and find out you're grieving. So the first order of business is to take tender care of your grieving heart. All of the stuff, meaning, purpose, blah, blah, that all almost kind of comes out of the grieving process as you start to heal. And there's a real and natural impatience to want to jump to that stage. In fact, I've had people say to me, oh, I'm not going to do all this grieving stuff. I'm just going to go straight to the plan B. And I'd be like, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Let me know if it's possible, because I think everyone tries a few shortcuts before they work out, actually, there's no way round grief. You just got to go through it. And actually, it can also be a beautiful and life-changing experience and life-enhancing experience, because grief is a form of love. Mm-hmm. It's the love that we have for those children that aren't in our lives. It's precious. And learning how to work with it and be with it and let it heal us is transformative.
Absolutely. And that is a perfect segue into my next question. But before I get there, I want to share the results of our poll that we did. So it looks like we have about 30% from the US, 47% from the UK, and 23% of you are in all those other amazing places that you entered into the chat box. Okay, so I've got another poll for you. Sorry, you guys, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay, here we go. So this one, I wanted to ask you, have you struggled to find meaning in your life without kids? So you can say, not at all, my life feels very meaningful. Somewhat, I still feel something is missing. Or yes, I've struggled to find meaning without children. So we'll let you guys answer for a second here. So I'm glad that you touched on grief, because that really is what my next question for you focuses on. I first bought your book and found you when I was at this very pivotal moment of trying to decide if I wanted to put my health first by having my hysterectomy or trying a second round of IVF. And so it was this obviously very pivotal moment where the two could lead to very different outcomes. And I found so much confidence in your book, because it, like I said, it did show me that, we do have this ability to thrive and have amazing lives without children, and didn't have a lot of role models for that in my life. So, and actually, just as a side note, I recommend anybody look for mentors that are childless. Jody has an amazing bank of that on Pinterest. I don't know if you house it somewhere else as well, but of childless role models. If you're feeling like you can't imagine what a life could look like, there are so many examples of people who are doing it and very happy. And so anyway, sorry, that's a little side note, but it did give me so much confidence to see and hear your story. But I did find that I was in this place when I first bought it where I was drowning in grief. And I would start your book and it would just scare me. I could not keep going with it, because it was just terrifying, because it was me having to face that I really was going to be childless. And so I have to say, I started it a few times before I actually got all the way through it. But since then, I have read it a few times all the way through, and I find myself going back over and over, especially on my Kindle edition. I love, I can like plug in keywords and it will bring up like what I'm thinking about. And so it's been such a comfort for me. And I mention this because I can't really overstate how difficult the grief part has been for me. I had, I would say the last year, the entire time I was in my infertility, those 4 years, but especially the last year and then the year after my hysterectomy, it was just brutal. I mean, I was definitely in a depression for a good chunk of that time, and really was not finding joy or contentment or anything in my life. And it kind of just took over. The infertility took over, the grief took over, and I mean, the best way I can describe it is I did feel like I was drowning in it. I was just weepy all the time. I would explode into tears unexpectedly or expectedly. I was just so sad. I mean, the grief was just so profound. And so I think that similar to what you're saying, when you're in that space, you're in the depths of your grief, it's so difficult to envision a future for yourself when you're in that, because you picture that you're going to feel like that all the time. And so if you're having a difficult time just getting through the day, it is really hard to try to plan for your future and to envision this new life for yourself. So I have pulled out a quote from your chapter that I really like that talks about focusing on starting with small steps. And so you said, whilst you can't force yourself to enjoy life's pleasures, again, if you're still processing your grief, what you can do is start doing the work to uncover your joy. And so I like that because it does speak to this thing where you can be in two places at once. You can honor your grief and be working through that, but still find just taking very small steps to start, as you say, uncovering your joy. So,
because I think actually also when you're in deep grief, even the idea that you might one day be happy again, that you one day might feel joy again, that can feel quite blasphemous.
Yeah.
So not only can it be really hard to feel joy or even little moments of it, but you kind of sometimes there's a lot of resistance to it because it's like, no, that's it. My life is destroyed. I'm never going to be having children. I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life. And you with your ideas of like, doing little exercises or having fun or trying to cheer me up. No. There can be a really quite aggressive resistance to the idea that you are ever going to come through this. And I think that's the anger part of grief.
Yeah.
And I really dissect the whole kind of, grief process in my book. And I think I think sometimes people really want us to be done with it. They don't know how to talk to us about it. And so it's like, they want to cheer us up or bright side it, anything. I love Brene Brown's expression, anything that comes after the two words at least is not empathy. Well, at least you can travel, at least you can lie in. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. But it's just that it can be, even being around people, say like me, who are actually through their grief and out the other side and have been for some time, can actually be quite challenging. So although I longed for role models of women who were in a great place, I think I also would have found them quite annoying in a way, because it's like I needed to be with people who were at the stage I was at when I was at it. And I guess it's comforting to know that there are people on the other side. I remember I gave a talk. It was like when I was writing the first edition of my book, and I was giving a talk, and someone in the audience said, okay, maybe you are the only person in the world who can get through this. She genuinely believed that the kind of the path I was setting out and the stories I was telling were just a pie in the sky. Maybe it was just me. And it wasn't true. I'd already worked with many women and I'd seen other women coming through this process. But it broke my heart, that comment, because of what it told me about what she felt about her grief.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, when I started, I mean, I'm not through my grief. I feel like I still have those bad days. It's just so much less than it used to be. But when I was in that deepest phase of going through my grief, and then it started lifting, I felt a sense of guilt. I started having feelings of, well, I guess I didn't want to be a mom that much, or else how could I just be feeling good right now? And it felt like in order to honor my desire to be a mom, either to prove it to myself or to prove it to my family that I really wanted it, or my friends or whoever, society, that I had to be in constant mourning for the rest of my life to prove to people how much I wanted it. And it started to be so silly, because it's like, look, I don't have a choice. I mean, I guess we always do. I could try to adopt. I could try a lot of things. I could try surrogate. There's always, I feel like, something else you could try, but I'm done with all of that. So in making that decision, it did get to a place where it was like, what is the point of holding on to this specifically for the purpose of showing myself or proving to others how much I really wanted this and that my grief is valid? And I think part of that is that this idea of disenfranchised grief, that it's not recognized by society. And so it almost feels like you have to prove it. Like you have to let people see some, I felt like I had to let people see some of my grief. And then if I got my life back on track, it would vanish, because it was now, oh, well, you're fine, you know?
So you can just get on with things. Oh, good, that's Katie sorted. We don't have to worry about her anymore.
Yeah.
I think that idea of needing other people to see it is something also that feeds into sometimes some of our early kind of, plan B ideas, or even searches for meaning. We can do quite public, quite dramatic things, almost as a way, because we want people to see our pain. I used to have this fantasy that I was going to, sell all my possessions, move to Laos, which is a little island, in a little country near Thailand. I was going to live in this orphanage on the Mekong Delta, take care of all these children. And then when I died, I was going to be this eccentric English lady with these 2 long grey plaits, who died, and there'd be this little piece in the South Sea China News. I had this whole fantasy mapped out. And I blame the king and I, quite frankly, because it was a whole thing going on in there. Very old reference for those of you born in the 60s. And one day I realised I hadn't thought about the children at all in this fantasy. Mm-hmm. It was all a performative fantasy in my mind of me kind of being this incredibly self-sacrificing, open-hearted, generous. I call them the Mother Teresa fantasies in my book. And I think it's because I wanted people to sort of say, look, she couldn't have children, but she loved children so much, and she had such a maternal heart. Look what she did with her life. I wanted them to see that pain. I wanted them to see my mother's heart. I wanted it right there, so that people would always know what it had meant to me, and how not having children had shaped my entire life. But I think I luckily I didn't sell everything and move to Laos, although that might have been nice. Some women do. Some childless women do these big Mother Teresa projects, and then they burn out, because actually the motivation for doing them is not quite what they thought it was. It's very common.
So for those who are really in the depths of their grief, and they want to start taking a small step to uncover their joy, is there something you would recommend as a way to kind of tap into that, even if it's just identifying those, like you said, small steps, small things?
Yes, I mean, there is an exercise in my book, which I think, what's it called? I think I have it here. Yeah, it is called Taking Little Steps, and it's called Russian Dolls, the exercise that goes before it, and it's a list of kind of prompts, of questions that takes you through key stages of your girlhood, and your sort of pre-adolescence and your young teenage years, really asking you questions about what interested you, what brought meaning to your life at those ages. And because as most of us as children and as young people, we didn't actually question what brought meaning. We kind of naturally followed it. We followed our interests. To use Joseph Campbell's phrase, we followed our bliss. And as we get older and we get sort of indoctrinated into pronatalism, and then we get lost along the way in the dream of motherhood, we can really lose contact with who we are, who we were, because also we may not be her ever again. the person, and that's something that's really important, the person, the woman that we will be who comes out the other end of our grieving process is someone we haven't met yet. Grief is an identity transformation. So we will be changed by this experience. So you might have had a dream, let's say when you were 16, of being a singer, but actually when you go back to it now, you realize that actually that's not quite me anymore. That's an old dream. It's kind of lost its juice. So that exercise helps you to excavate all of the things that used to interest you. And then the taking a tiny step is really, okay, do one thing this week, one low risk, cheap as possible, easy thing to kind of just take one little step towards that. I mean, I always say to people, don't quit your job, don't move, don't buy a camper van, move to Nova Scotia, all of those things. Just if you really think you want to become a world-class sort of animal sanctuary person, maybe go and volunteer for a night or a weekend. So just start taking little steps to test out and just see what brings you even a little flash of joy again. And it can be really, really hard to even give ourselves permission to do that. I mean, for several years, really, the only thing that brought me joy was kind of carbohydrates, I think. I definitely, carbohydrates, because I couldn't read, I couldn't watch films. So many things that used to bring me pleasure just didn't work for me anymore. And that's part of grief for many of us, which is anhedonia. Anhedonia is actually the inability to feel joy. And it can go on for so long that it can feel like a personality change. And it's like, okay, I just thought, because mine happened at midlife, I was also going through the perimenopause. I was also single, working for myself. And I just thought, well, this is my middle-aged personality, grumpy, sad and joyless, but it wasn't, it was grief.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of power in being able to identify it as that, because I didn't put that word, I didn't associate that with the experience I was having, and that made me feel extremely lost because I just didn't know what was happening with me. And once I had a name for it and I recognized it as, oh, this is grief. If I look up grief, I'm experiencing all these things. It's a match. And it was very powerful because it allowed me to then find resources and learn more about grief and learn about how I could, work with it. And I don't want to, I guess almost befriend it. It's like you have to kind of embrace it in order to get through it. So, all right. I had a few other questions for you, but I want to make sure we have time for our Q&A from our audience as well. So I'm going to show you guys where we ended up with this last poll. So it looks like 4% of you are not struggling at all. So cheers, that's amazing. 41% said you're somewhat struggling to find meaning, but you still feel like something is missing. And 54% said yes, you definitely struggle to find meaning without children. So makes sense because you're on this webinar. So hopefully you are getting some ideas today that will help you move forward and see things from a little bit different perspective. So I have one more poll. Have you read Jody's book, Living the Life Unexpected? So
I think what you said about needing to a few attempts to read it, it's not uncommon. A lot of women buy it and actually kind of have it on their bedside table or even somewhere more private for quite a long time. Because, and this includes women for whom, childlessness is a permanent thing. There are no more options. Yeah. But there is an emotional acceptance. It's like somehow, okay, by reading this book, I'm saying to myself that I am childless. There's a sort of beginning of the acceptance process, coming out of denial that there's any other option. And a lot of women fear there's going to be a huge amount of pain from reading the book. When in actual fact, yes, there is pain, but there's a lot of support. There's a lot of aha moments. There's I've been told, it's quite a funny read. It's very honest. You meet a lot of other women. There are case studies from 40 women around the world, sort of dotted. So you don't just get to hear about my journey. You hear about all these other journeys as well. So I think it's actually a very affirming book.
It is.
And for anyone who's reading it for the first time, you do not have to do the exercises. don't let not doing the exercises stop you from reading the book. You know, don't get to the end of chapter 1 and think, okay, I haven't done the exercise, so I can't do chapter 2. Kick that perfectionist gremlin out. Just, I never do.
I have one of those.
I never do the exercises in books. I always mean to, but I never do them.
I like that perfectionist gremlin. I definitely have some of those. Yeah, I mean, I did a book club, a virtual book club with your book. I guess that was maybe over a year ago. But it was fantastic. That even just being a small group, I mean, there were maybe no less than 10 of us that did it, but it felt just so nice to have the support to work through it. And so maybe you can find a buddy if you're nervous to read it. Or do you run a book?
We have a reading group. We have a reading group in the Gateway Women online community. There is a subgroup of it, which is a reading group. So anyone who's working through the book, there's always someone, you know, I've created videos for each chapter and then like reading prompts to kind of take people through each chapter. So there's a lot of extra information there and extra support for anyone who wants it. And of course, you can ask the author any questions you want.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it looks like 37% have read your book. We've got almost as many, 31% who have bought it, but they need a little courage to read it all the way through. So for those of you who answered that one, maybe check out Jody's group there. That's the reading group. And it really did make a difference for me to have some other women to go through it with and to be able to talk about it with. So 24% said no, but they plan to. So I know you can pick it up really anywhere books are sold, right? Amazon has it, and you can buy it through your publisher. So, and 8% have not. So, all right. Okay, so I had one more question. Maybe you can give me like a 2-minute answer, so we have a few minutes for questions. It's going to be way pared down from what I had originally planned on. But you know, the bulk of your book, I know you changed the subtitle of it, but it used to be about putting together your plan B. So, you know, you had expectations for what your future would look like with kids. You were holding space for that. You had visions of what it would look like. And now you are in a place where you are, you know, wiping those visions clean, getting a fresh start, and you're thinking about what else you want to include in your plan B. So I love this quote I'm going to pull out from your book that says, "We have a choice. When we are ready, we can create our new life around something that makes us feel alive in the way that we were convinced only having a child could, or we can flounder for years, never really living, just existing." And I love that you frame it as a choice, because I know that for me and for a lot of women who wanted to have kids but were not able to for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like we were pushed into this and we lost our choices along the way, and we now just have to deal with our circumstances, and that's the end of the story. And I love that you frame it in a way that does bring choice back into it, that even now where you're at, maybe you don't have the choices that you wish you would have had. They got limited, but where you're at now, where you are accepting a life without children and that's your future, I love that we still have this choice in how we process that and move forward. So I just wanted to maybe share a little bit about how does someone start putting their plan B together? How do they, what is this? It sounds so big.
I don't kind of, putting your plan B together doesn't come till chapter 11 of 12 chapters. Most of what you need to do is actually kind of the preparatory work. I mean, a huge part of the preparatory work is moving through the grieving process. It is unpacking pronatalism and really kind of raising your own consciousness around what you believe is, you know, is possible for women other than motherhood. It's about learning what you really love. It's like, okay, well, if it's not motherhood, and how do I know what I want anymore? Because I think one of the things that can happen with childlessness is we not only do we lose touch with other dreams, but we also lose our sense of trust in ourselves. It's like, well, all of the decisions I made in life got me to this point. So actually, maybe I'm just really rubbish at kind of making decisions about my life. And there can become a real paralysis, a real fear well, what if I move forward and the next thing doesn't work either? You know, what if Jody's the only person that can have a plan B? Maybe I'm just going to, you know, flounder and be miserable for the rest of my life. And also, there's this fantasy that a plan B is this big thing that someone can point to and say, well, that's what she's doing now. You know, like Jody, you know, she's a writer, she's a this. It's like, what comes after the, what do you do? That's not a plan B. That's what you do. A plan B is an inside job. It's, your life might actually look completely the same on the outside to other people, but you've completely renovated your interior world. You're inhabiting your life with peace, with passion, with purpose. It's meaningful to you. It can be a really quiet life. There's nothing wrong with a quiet life. We don't all have to sort of turn into campaigners or start writing about it or even start talking about it. So I think one of the things we need to do is to really educate ourselves, and the book takes you through that process, also about what a plan B isn't. And that, like I said at the beginning, it's your plan B, which is basically the rest of your life as a childless woman. Plan B is just shorter, is unique. You know, there will never be another childless woman like you, ever. No one will ever have the experiences you've had, the culture you've got, the learning you've got, the personality you've got. You know, you are unique. You are a gift. You know, you are a gift to the world just as you are. You don't need to prove anything. You've done nothing wrong. You are nothing wrong. You're already a miracle. You're unique. So it's like, well, how do I really believe that? And how do I express that uniqueness in my life in a way that works for me? And that's the path. So a lot of it is about really having belief in ourselves again, not in a kind of self-helpy way, in a really, really deep way. And I think that's where meaning really starts to come into it, because meaning is when we connect to something that feels bigger than us. For a lot of people, that's religion, but it could be so many things. And we could talk another hour, like, what does meaning really, really mean? And it means something different to each of us, and it changes over time. And for me, my sense of meaning is going through a real transformation at the moment as I move out of middle age and into elderhood. And that's also a big deal, because we then face another challenge as aging childless women in a society which has no role models for any other way to be an older childless woman other than to be a grandmother or to be a witch. And then we have to deal with all our friends and colleagues and society, all the grandchildren worship coming along as well. And that can bring up more grief, because that's an, oh, I don't get that experience either. You know, so just so you know, book after next, that's what it's on.
That's amazing. And just listening to you talk, I'm getting like all like just so feeling so motivated, and I don't know, you just have the way that you express yourself and are able to talk about these issues is just so inspiring. So just loving this. So I'm looking through the questions that we've gotten, and we've got a few that are where there's one question here that a few people have asked. I'm going to start with that because we definitely won't have time to get to all of them. So a few people have asked, and you just touched on it, about the idea of grandchildren. So they found that they went through their grief, they processed a lot of it. Now their friends are having grandchildren, and they're finding this whole second wave of grief, and it's you know, been difficult for them. So can you speak to that for those who are in that situation?
Yeah, it's well, once again, it's a disenfranchised grief. So it's another case of where, you know, we can't really talk about it, and because people, you know, will shame us and say, well, it's not that bad, you know, all the things you can do because you don't have kids. It comes up again. And also, I think there is the kind of grandchildren mania. There is some friends can become really quite obsessed with their grandkids and just talk about nothing else. And it's that whole motherhood thing all over again. And it's like, if you've maybe had a 10, 15, 20-year break from that, it can really slap you in the face. I see it as another opportunity to heal our hearts, because that's what grief does, is it heals our heart. So when something new comes up that wakes up grief, that means there's another opportunity to do more healing. And because grief isn't there to hurt us, it's there to heal us. And I'm just at the beginning of this process. I support a lot of women who are, further along. And I think it's like, oh shit, not this again. Because there's the social exclusion, the sense of being left out of this very big club. And tied into that also, of course, well, who's going to be there for me when I'm old? World Childless Week is coming up in September the 14th to the 20th, which is happening online all over the world. And one of the days, I made sure it was in there, is Aging Without Children. So we're doing that on Wednesday, the 16th of September. So anyone who's interested will be doing a lot of programming. So worldchildlessweek.net around aging without children. So come and join me there.
Great, thank you. I've seen a few people have asked a question about friendships, and just to let you guys know too, I did do a webinar focused on friendship a few months ago. So if you want to go to my YouTube channel, we had a really good discussion with the two women behind Motherhood, which is fantastic.
I love that one.
And they have such a good friendship story. So they came on and we talked all about this topic too. So you can go to my YouTube channel and learn more about that there. But for me, I have been on Bumble, which is a dating app, but they have a friend version. So you can turn off the dating part and turn on the friend part. And I have found so many amazing friends on there, because you can actually put a filter on it so that if someone has kids, they don't even show up. So I have found a really good childless network of support through that. And also, I don't know if they have it in the UK or other parts of the world, but meetup.com is something where you can start your own group based on any topic. You can join a group if there's already one. I have lived in some cities that have had meetups for childless women. But Jody, what have you found in terms of, I know the friendship piece is so big, but I think
for me, it was one of the hardest parts of my childless journey. I call it #friendship apocalypse. Because I had spent so many years thinking that one day my children would be my friends' kind of playmates. And I kept up with, even though it became increasingly painful, I kept up with my friends' lives and their children's lives, until I really started my grieving process and realized, and just sort of stopped making the effort to kind of be that third wheel in other people's lives. And when I stopped doing that, I'm sure many of you can recognize what happened, which is basically I just dropped off the map completely. And it wasn't that I was unpopular, or I thought I might be. I thought maybe I was just a terrible friend. It was another huge part of my letting go, was letting go of my social circle. And it absolutely broke me, and I had two of the lowest years of my life, grieving perimenopause, grieving my friendships, grieving my, childlessness. I'd got divorced a few years previously. So I was single, childless, friendless. And I think people underestimate how incredibly hard it is, particularly for women friends, when you may have been friends for a long time and you've been able to discuss anything. Can you have a look at this weird lump? Do you think he's cheating on me? Or, I fancy my boss, what shall I do? Or, whatever it is, you can kind of talk about anything. And suddenly there's what I call this baby elephant in the room. You can't talk about how difficult it is that your friends are becoming mothers and you're not. You can't talk about how you feel that you can't have a conversation with your friend anymore without her constantly interrupting it because her kids are on the phone, or whatever, or that it's all about her and her kids. And she actually doesn't notice that she hasn't asked a single thing about you. And I had this extraordinary experience where the last kind of big social thing I went to with my sort of old peer group, and it was it was like an outdoor thing. It was a picnic. Everyone there was a parent. And then one of my goddaughters, who was like 16 at the time, was there. She came towards me with another baby on her hip, which was someone else's sort of late baby. And saying, I can't wait till I have children. And I was suddenly like, oh my God, this is just going to keep happening. You know, people are just going to keep having babies. This is never going to end. And I found it so hard to talk to my old friends, because I began to understand that they were actually really threatened by me as well. Because in the 20 years that I'd been hoping to have children, and the 5 years I'd been healing, you know, it hadn't been that I'd stayed at home. You know, I'd done, you know, a degree, a master's. I was trained to be a psychotherapist. I'd been up the Amazon the wrong way. That's another story. You know, I'd done a lot of traveling. I'd started Gateway Women. And I think they found me quite intimidating, because in a way their lives had become about families, and those were the conversations. So there was this sense of just like, we couldn't connect anymore. And it broke my heart. And the only way I could get through it is by meeting new, wonderful, childless women through Gateway Women. And a few of my friendships did survive. But interestingly, they are each with mothers who are not overly identified with the role of mother. They would never post pictures of their kids on Facebook. They would never use their children's photo as their photo on Facebook. They would never say they were so-and-so's mum. They are them, and they are mothers, and they're great mothers. But they haven't collapsed their identity into motherhood. But I also don't want to be too hard on those women who do collapse their identity into motherhood, because I think I would have been one of them. I think I would have been the most terrible mother ball. I'm pretty sure. So I don't want to be too hard on those women. But it's hard.
It is. It's something that comes up just over and over in the conversations I have with women. And I don't think there's any like easy solutions. I think sometimes it does. Like you said, I've also been able to keep some friendships with my friends who are moms, and that's also been the defining feature, I think, in the ones that have survived, is that they still see me as a person and take interest in my life, and they have other aspects of their lives that are very full and that we can talk about outside of just the kids. So but I definitely, for me, it did require creating a new support network, meeting new people, really putting myself out there. And I've done that through different online resources. I've also done it through just getting back into hobbies that I had. I mean, I met a wonderful friend by going to a cheese making class in Asheville. It was like, you know, how to make it at home. And there was a fantastic woman there. We just started chatting, and it was like, hey, do you want to hang out? And, you know, we became friends. And so I think it really is, you've got to put yourself out there and look for those avenues of where you can meet people.
There's another point I just want to add, which is that I found that when I had more conscious childless women in my life as well, to have these kinds of conversations with, it meant that my cup was getting filled.
Yes.
So then I could be around my friends with kids, because I wasn't going there to get my childlessness understood. I was getting that need met elsewhere. So then when I was with my friends with kids, I was kind of able to be there more wholeheartedly and more interested in their lives and more understanding of the fact that they're a bit myopic at this time in their life. So actually, I think it's not that you have to ditch all your old friends, but you do need people who get you. You do need your tribe.
Absolutely. I had the same experience. And I think it's that piece, going back to what we talked about earlier, validation and feeling like you're being seen. And so I had the same. Once I started feeling, finding friendships with other women who are childless, and honestly, a lot of them are child-free by choice, which I have found just amazing, because they have such a different perspective that I'm able to learn from, that it's been very healing, and I love having that support as well. But it has made it easier.
Women, I found them very challenging at first. I think it's because they challenged my unconscious pronatalism at first. But I've learned a lot from them.
Yeah, same. There's something very healing about hearing someone say, yeah, this life is so amazing that I picked it. I chose it over the other one. And it's like, oh, really? Tell me more. Like, tell me all of the perks I'm going to have, because I need to hear this other perspective. So, well, I know we're a little bit over, which is a shame, because we have so many questions in the Q&A that we were not able to get to. So I apologize, you guys. I read through your questions, and there were some really good ones in there, but we are already over in time. So I apologize if we didn't get to your question. Jody, thank you so much for being here. and for what you do for this community. I mean, I feel like in some ways, you helped build the framework and the foundation of having these discussions and having language around it, and having like identifying some of these themes that come up. And so, you know, I feel like that has helped. There's now, my favorite place is Instagram to find community. I just love the Instagram community around Childless Not by Choice. But I do feel like a lot of the conversations that are happening there are being built on a lot of what you created, and getting that conversation started, and being so open about it. And so I'm very grateful to you, and just love all the work that you're doing. So again, if you guys want to connect with Jody, or connect with any of the resources she offers, go check out Gateway Women. And if you are interested in learning more about my Childless Support Circle, you can find it at chasingcreation.org/support. And then my next webinar will be in August, and it's going to be focused on kind of navigating family relationships. And the guest for that one is going to be TBD. I've been planning for this one and have not actually reached out to anyone yet, but I'll get my act together here in the next week and put something together. But yeah, so thank you for joining. And again, thank you, Jody, for being here and sharing your wisdom with everyone who joined from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you to everyone joining, and thank you to everyone watching on the replay. It's a pleasure, and thank you for honouring my work in such a beautiful way, and for carrying it forward for the next generation. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.